This is Lynn DiMartini. Coming here to kind of give you another little talk. It's been a couple weeks since I've been on because I was on vacation. But just want to do a little impromptu discussion because I've had a lot of people ask me questions about different kinds of sweeteners. And there's kind of a hierarchy of sweeteners, and a lot of it's based on what they call the glycemic index. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the specifics of that. I encourage you to do some research. I want to remind you that even though I'm a health professional, I don't do any diagnosis or treatment in this media. I'm here to just give you some information and some suggestions to kind of give you a little help in deciding on what kind of choices to make. The good old standby that most of us are familiar with since childhood was regular old pure cane sugar, made from the sugar cane. It's far removed from the sugar cane fields that they came from. I was actually in Ecuador the last couple of weeks and watched them extract the juice from the cane sugar, or from the sugar cane. And it goes through a whole lot of processing from that point on. But there's no nutritive need in the body for sugar. There is a nutritive need in the body, especially the brain, because it's the most sugar-hungry place, and that in the brain for glucose. All foods of any kind break down eventually into glucose. The rate of which they do that and in the form vary tremendously. Sucrose, which is what the sugar is, the white sugar, goes immediately to the bloodstream and creates a spike of your insulin. The insulin is the hormone in your body that helps get the sugar that the body needs into the cell. We discussed in a previous talk that there's a resistance that can happen in the cell to that sugar, and what they call insulin resistance, which leads to diabetes. And so the sugar remains in the body's fluids and is excreted out in the urine. So a lot of times that's one of the signs and symptoms of diabetes is the high sugar content in the urine, because the sugar is going in, but it's not going into the cell. So the body's actually starved for it. There's a lot of other different forms of sugar. And the white sugar, there's some that call raw sugar, which is just unbleached. It's not any healthier. It's still high on the glycemic level, and it's very unsuitable for the human body. Sugar has a bad habit of really doing a lot of damage to our immune system. So if you have any kind of health concerns, chronic illness, or anything like that that you were trying to beat, any sugar you take that way is going to go against you. So I encourage you to give it up. It is the most highly addictive thing on the planet. There's been studies where rats were given the option of sugar and cocaine, and they opted for the sugar. So it initiates receptors in the brain for those kind of morphine receptors that keep the cravings going. And just like an alcoholic can't just do a little bit of alcohol, a little bit of sugar, or in some cases carbohydrates, keep the cravings going. So the only way to get away from those cravings is total abstinence, which is very difficult because they put sugar in everything. Even cigarette wrappers and things like that have sugar in them. Things that you would never think would have sugar are laced with that. For that reason, they want you to buy their product. So I encourage you to read labels. A lot of times they hide it in a lot of different other terminologies. It may not just say cane sugar. It might say something like maltodextrin or another source of a sugar that has the same effect on the body. Another really serious health problem we've had over the last couple decades at least has been the high fructose corn syrup that they've replaced the sugar with because it's cheaper. It's made from corn, which is genetically modified, and it's very cheap. And it has extremely high glycemic index to it. And a lot of the health problems today, especially diabetes, can be directly correlated with the rise in the consumption of high fructose corn syrup. There's also brown sugar and powdered sugar and all different other forms of sugar. These are no better than white sugar. They might look healthier because they're not white, and they always tell you stay away from white products, but they're no healthier. So avoid them in any kind of way. Obviously, you're going to get it in your lifestyle, no matter how hard you try to avoid it, it's going to come up. But the most you can eliminate, the better. There's a lot of other types of sugars out there. Some of them are more natural than others. It's kind of a continuum. One that's kind of this is a byproduct of the processing of sugar is one that we call molasses. And if you buy the raw or blackstrap molasses, it does have some nutrient to it. It still has a high glycemic level and it will spike your insulin, but it does have some nutrients to it. So it's a step above it. It's not something I would ever use on a large basis. There's even a lot of natural healthy sugars that you still need to use with limitation. Probably the most common and popular of most of the sweeteners that most people use is honey. Now, there's all different kinds of honey. True honey, which is extracted and raw and unfiltered, has tremendous health benefits. Again, it's high on the glycemic level, so you don't want to eat it a lot. A little bit here and there is fine. It does have a lot of nutrients in it, and you can get the royal jelly and all the other byproducts of the beehive as well. The only way to really know if you're getting true honey, unless you've watched it be extracted, is to buy it in the cone, the honeycomb that they actually take from the hive, because that's usually unfiltered, unprocessed honey. A lot of the stuff you find in the stores has been watered down or added. They've had other additives to it. It's not really honey. So, that little bear-looking plastic bottle, I wouldn't buy anything like that. Try and find a good beekeeper in your area if you're going to use honey, and make sure you've asked questions, how he processes and such, so that you can get the purest honey you can that has the most value. It's also a wonderful thing to have around for wound care because it's an amazing wound healer. Even hospitals have used honey impregnated bandages because it is such a wonderful wound healer. So you can't have too much honey around. Good honey will also kind of crystallize sometimes, and you can just warm it up in a basin, and that will bring it back to form. But again, just don't overdo it. Using things other than sugar in a recipe have to be tweaked. And there's so many resources on YouTube and everything about how to use different sweeteners and things to bake, because it does have a different effect. And of course, the difference between that, the only thing I use white sugar for would be for anything that was anything that needed fermentation. When people are making wines and fermentation and kombucha and things like that, they usually use white sugar. Wine is made from sugar and a yeast. Mead is made from honey and a fruit source and yeast, or even just honey and the yeast itself. So honey is a good choice on a moderate, if you're moderate with it. Another one that's very common is maple syrup. I don't have any with me. If you look for the grade B maple syrup, or if you tap it yourself from the tree, there's still some nutrients in that. Again, it's high glycemic. But it's better to use that on your pancakes or waffles or whatever, that or honey, rather than using, the favorite bottled syrups. Most of those are mostly high fructose corn syrup. And even if if they're labeled no GF added, they usually have other high fructose type ingredients in them, and you want to avoid it, especially if you have diabetic issues. And a lot of times there's people out there who don't realize they have it until it becomes too much. I mean, it's a very gradual, slow process to becoming diabetic. And if you can intervene before it reaches that point, you're so much better. So avoiding those high glycemic index foods is still going to be your best bet. There's a whole lot of other things on the market they sell for sweeteners. A lot of them are sugar alcohols. I don't really recommend any of them. The ones that are most commonly known are the aspartame, which is usually the little yellow packets, the saccharin, which is the pink packets, and the Splenda, which is the blue packets. Splenda is sucralose. And again, those break down into alcohols in the body, and they're not of any benefit, and they have a lot of side effects in your health. I would totally avoid any of those sweeteners. The only one that is sometimes suitable and a lot of recipes call for it, you can use either erythritol or xylitol. In excess using these too much, you're going to wind up with diarrhea. They used to use it a lot in some of the sugar-free gums because it has a really good sweetness and texture to it, but it did tend to cause some diarrhea. Another sweetener out there that got touted really heavy in the health food world for a long time was agave syrup. And it was touted as, you know, the next best thing to honey. But again, it's very processed. It's not a lot better than the high fructose corn syrup, so I would stay away from it. A lot of the health food recipes call for this, but there are alternatives to that, and I'll show you a few of those here. Another sweetener, which is a little bit better, is yacon syrup. Again, it's very concentrated, so you want to use a minimal amount, but at least it does give you some nutrition along with the sweetness. A lot of raw food recipes call for using dried fruit. That is a good alternative, but again, it's high glycemic, so you want to keep it limited. A lot of people add chopped dates or figs or raisins or anything, and they are very sweet. When you put them in a smoothie or in a recipe, it will add a great deal of sweetness. Probably one of the most popular things that has come out in the market, and I've been using it for over 20 years, and that's stevia. Now, stevia comes in a lot of different forms. They have a powdered stevia, which you can use for baking and stuff. It does have kind of a texture to it that's not real. I mean, trying to put it in a drink is not really good. I prefer to use the liquid drops. And you can get, and I recommend Sweet Leaf brand. I'm not a pusher of brands, but there's a ton of stevias on the market now that are put out because they jumped on the bandwagon, and a lot of them are not what they claim. Sweet Leaf has been real reliable, and you can get it in a lot of different flavors. They have, you know, lemon and peppermint and chocolate. They have a lot of different flavors, so you can add that to your tea. And it's a great deal sweeter than most sweeteners. It's not really a sweetener, it's a plant. It just has a sweetness to it. So you use a very little bit. Try just a couple drops or so, and then, you know, find your level of what you need for your sweetness. But this is the one I've used it in making lemonade or iced tea or anything like that, and that's been it's very beneficial. It doesn't have any bad side effects, and it's actually good for your blood sugar. So this one would be the one I would mostly recommend to replace all those others I've mentioned. There are some other superfoods that have a sweet taste to them. They're not really listed as sweeteners, but you can use them for such. One of them is lucuma powder, and this has a real kind of a malty taste. It's really pleasant, depending on what you're making, but it's good to use like in smoothies or in some recipes. Another one that I really like for some things, I have a big jar of it here, is mesquite flour. You know, the mesquite trees that the farmers around here are really eager to plow under and get rid of. They have a pod on them that can be ground up, and it's very sweet. The animals love it. And it has, again, that kind of a malty taste to it. I was really surprised how good it does make a lot of recipes taste. So that's something to experiment with. Look for mesquite powder. There's another one out there. It's monk fruit or lakanto. I've got a couple little packets of it here. And it's a really good alternative. To me, it's not as sweet. To some people, it might be. But to me, I have to use several packets of it to equal what I would use if I was using sugar as a substitute. Last but not least, and this is probably the one that has the most variety of options, is coconut. You can use coconut crystals, coconut nectar if you need a liquid, or you can just use coconut sugar. And so everything that you use for sugar or syrup, you have an option with coconut. So these are, unless you have a sensitivity to coconut, and there are people who are, these are very good options. I will say anything that you use on a very often or daily basis, you do tend to have problems down the road of sensitivity to them. any kind of food that you eat every day, you can develop a sensitivity to. So mix it up, try different things. Try doing without sugar if you can. It's still the best way to go is to, once you clean up your diet a little bit, you don't need as much sugar. Other foods start to taste better. Sugar really does change the flavor of foods. So that's really all I have to say about sweeteners. If you have any questions, please leave them down below or text me or email me. I'm going to be posting this on Facebook, so you can like and share my Facebook page. And I welcome any questions so that I can make more videos on different topics that you might be interested in. So on that note, I'm going to close for today, and I will see you next Sunday at 7 p.m. Thank you very much. Good night.